Okay, I've muted us on that. We're ready to go. All right, whenever Mayor Mahovey's ready to start, we can.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. Let's call to order this meeting from Bishop City Council meeting for Monday, April 12th, 2021. Robin, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Kong,
Here.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Ellis,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz,
Here.
Mayor Mahovey.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public comment. Notice to the public, this time is set aside to receive public comment on matters not calendared on the agenda. When recognized, please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Under California law, the City Council is prohibited from generally discussing or taking action on items not included in the agenda. However, we may briefly respond to comments or questions from members of the public. Do we have any public comment?
No public comments on our public comment email, and I do not see any raised hands. Elaine, can you confirm?
There are no raised hands.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll move on to closed session. Tonight in closed session, we have 2 items. One is a liabilities claim, and the other is a conference with legal counsel of anticipated litigation. So we will go into closed session, and we will be back with the public around 6 p.m.
Everyone. Okay, our mics are on. Let's start Granicus. Are we ready to roll? Looks like we have all council members present. We'll go ahead and start the open session on Granicus and resume recording. So whenever Mayor's ready.
Do we want to promote Father John Gracie? Got it. All right. It is 6 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, 2021, and I'm going to open the open session of the City of Bishop City Council meeting. Our invocation today will be given by Father John Gracie of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you to please remain standing while I lead us into pledge.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, not so much to be understood as to understand, not so much to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying that we awake to eternal life. Lord God, make us all instruments of your peace, that in all we say and do, we will seek to make the world a better place by seeking the common interest. Hear the prayer we bring before you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Robin, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kong,
Here.
Councilmember Garcia,
here,
Councilmember Ellis,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz,
Here.
Mayor Mahovey.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public comment. Notice to the public this time is set aside to receive public comment on matters not calendared on the agenda. When recognized, please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Under California law, the City Council is prohibited from generally discussing or taking action on items not included on the agenda. However, we may briefly respond to questions or comments from members of the public. Therefore, we will definitely listen to all public comment, but we'll generally not discuss the matter or take action on it. Did we get any public comment to our email address?
No public comments received through email, and I do not see any raised hands. Elaine, can you confirm?
There are no raised hands.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to report out on actions taken in closed session as required by law. Ryan, do you want me to report out?
I'll handle it. Thank you, Mayor. So
Okay.
there was a motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz, seconded by Councilmember Garcia. The vote was 5-0 to deny a liability claim made by Mr. Jonathan Beard against the City of Bishop, and that's my report.
Okay, then moving on to presentations. We are getting a presentation today on the Sustainable Recreation and Tourism Initiative update presented by Mammoth Lakes Trails and Public Access Foundation President John Wentworth. Welcome, Mr. Wentworth.
Good evening. Pleasure to see you all again. I have a presentation to share. Some of your fellow council members, Mr. Mayor, have seen this in bits and pieces a couple of times, so I very much appreciate their indulgence. But we all feel it's important for the full council to get a sense of what's going on out there. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we'll walk through this, and then certainly entertain and do my best to answer any questions you may have at the end. So I'm assuming everybody can see this okay?
Yep.
Here we are, April 12th, 2021. That picture's a little dated, but you never know. We're going to start off this evening with a land acknowledgement. This is a land acknowledgement that was crafted out of the Sustainable Recreation and Tourism Initiative. I'll read it just this once as we're in front of the Bishop City Council, and then you'll see this in our literature and our documents and things as we produce as we go forward. Public lands of the United States hold the creation stories, burial grounds, and ceremonies of Indigenous people who were killed or forcibly removed from their ancestral homes during territorial acquisition. Many tribes comprised of different bands live in the Eastern Sierra region, caring for their native lands as they coexist with the ongoing impacts of colonization. Past or present tribes and bands associated with the region that this effort is aware of include, but are not limited to, the Miwok, Monolek, Kututaka, Mono Manash, Numu, Paiute, Newe, Shoshone, Timbisha, Utu Utu, Guatu, Payote, and Washo. Two Numu terms describe the region and provide important context to ideas offered in this presentation. The first is Pamidu Twayabi, the Western Mountains, and the other more widely known place name is Payunadu, the place where water flows. This acknowledgement is an invitation to all organizations, residents, and visitors to recognize the way this history has shaped the present as all parties work together in anticipation of a better future. And forgive me if I've mangled the pronunciation of many of those names. I apologize for that. Anyway, the Eastern Sierra Sustainable Recreation Partnership. We've talked about this in the past. All of those agencies you see down there below are now are members and want to be members of the partnership, including the Park Service, BLM, and Caltrans. And the Sustainable Recreation and Tourism Initiative is a state-funded grant that's supporting the partnership. The partnership with the initiative grant was awarded back in 2019 for about $620,000. These are Proposition 68 funds from the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. It was awarded to the town of Mammoth Lakes on behalf of all of the regional partners. This was before the SCOG had that Joint Powers Authority and before we'd initiated that program. So that's kind of why it worked that way back in that day. And work got underway in July of 2019. Here's a representation of the geography that the initiative is engaging with. 3 counties, incorporated town, incorporated city, 5 national park units. Gives you a pretty good sense of the geography of what this effort is looking to engage with. Believe it or not, we all started off in the analog universe. That was a while ago, and who knows, maybe we'll get back to that before this is all done. But we did successfully make the transition to the virtual and the digital universe. It's actually proven to be very effective for the initiative. It's pretty efficient. It's a pretty efficient workspace. We get a lot of things done. And actually the public engagement was much higher than we anticipated working in the virtual space than it was in the analog world. So I'll give you a quick update on the 4 different tracks that make up this grant. The Recreation Stakeholders Grant generated about 183 project ideas from stakeholders throughout the region, and that track wrapped up on February 1st. The public was engaged not only in coming up with the project ideas, but also going through a process to score those project ideas. And a composite score was developed from individual scores based around stewardship of natural resources, access and equity, and community benefits. And that's how that composite score was derived. So it's a real sense of what the community values in these different project ideas as they came forward. One of the ideas that came forward, of course, is dispersed camping. And our friend and colleague, all of our friend and colleague up in Mono County, Bob Gardner, is leading an effort on this. I know Councilmember Ellis has been very involved as well. We're looking at how, the big question is, who picks up all the trash up there in the Eastern Sierra? Well, gosh, looks like it's us. So that's a very interesting effort, but these are the kinds of ideas that came out of those project ideas for the initiative. The second thing we're working on is a climate adaptation and resilience assessment. That's in the final stages. We just finished providing comments in the first administrative draft for that. And that will be out in the coming weeks. The next ESSRP meeting coming on May 3rd, the consultants, a group called PlaceWorks, will give a presentation for that. Excuse me. And again, here's the study area that we're looking at here. And a firm known as ICF, which is a firm of economists, is also doing a natural capital assessment, which is an economic assessment of all the ecosystem services that come out of the region. Their numbers are initially between 50 and 190 billion dollars on an annual basis. It's a very wide range, but this is the value of the economic and the ecosystem services that come out of the Eastern Sierra. And PlaceWorks, as a consulting firm, they're the group that wrote the most recent California Adaptation Planning Guide, which is especially significant given the governor's announcement just last week that the state's putting $500 million into fuels reduction work on land throughout the state of California, and also is launching a nature-based solutions program in the state. More on that in a little bit. The visitor audience track has been completed. That was completed back in February. And this is a series of recommendations and a program for all of us to really engage with the multi-million member strong visitor audience that comes up here. They're the source of all our economic activity, but they're also the source of all the stressors on the environment and the place that we live. Very interesting effort, identifying common themes for messaging, things like escape, adventure, surprise, but also memory, tradition, and connection. How can these things could be integrated into a comprehensive and engaged messaging program to speak with our audience. They've also matched up these messaging themes with values and principles for images and iconography to engage with the audience. And this is all framed by a set of guiding principles that was derived, again, by local stakeholders and communicators in the region. They're the folks that came up with this. This is obviously especially important given what we're seeing from national polling that 57% of those polled are intending to visit public lands more often this summer. And Visit California has launched a very ambitious campaign called Road Trip Republic, encouraging Californians to get out and road trip and visit around the state. And certainly Bishop, Inyo County, and the Eastern Sierra is going to be right in the center of all that. So it's a good time to be doing something like this. Here's a nice shot of that Visitor Connection Working Group. I sure recognize some of your friends and neighbors who are part of this, and these are the folks that came up with all these great ideas. Finally, we're moving now into the final track, which is the final stretch of this initiative. And this is the projects and funding effort. And it starts with the ideas that came up from the stakeholders. These ideas are then filtered basically from desirability to feasibility. And then we identify a portfolio of projects for which the grant will pay to write a number of grant proposals to support the region. So we take all these project ideas, run them through these filters, create this final portfolio of projects, and these will become the final 8, what we're calling the SRTI projects. And this grant will pay working with local regional partners, be it the SCOG, City of Bishop, Mono County, whoever wants to be the lead agency for this to write those grant applications and bring fundings in for the region. The initiative is on time and on budget. And again, the value of working in that virtual space really proved itself out. We've leveraged about $70,000 in volunteer hours and about $5,000 so far in cash donations. That $3,000 just got a bump last week because we needed to put some more fuel into the tank. So that's moving forward. And we're reaching out, as I mentioned, to all the partners in the ESSRP. Bishop is certainly a very important partner as part of this partnership. And so we're making sure that all the various boards understand and they're up to date. They understand what's going on, given the limitations, the constraints of the Brown Act. It's something it's important to do. A couple other tangential efforts here. The Eastern Sierra Council of Governments at Joint Powers Authority has initiated the Sustainable Recreation and Ecosystem Management Program, which we talked about, which the City of Bishop approved. A grant application for, I think it's about $3.75 million has been submitted on behalf of the SCOG to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. This funding would be used to establish a NEPA ID team that could do all the environmental work that's necessary to do fuels reduction projects, also do recreation projects. But again, the state of California is putting $1 billion into these efforts. And the state has identified the Eastern Sierra as being one of their primary holes. There's not enough work has been done over here. And I think we can all anticipate that there's going to be some money and some resources coming our way to deal with fuels work. I know there's a fire just down by Onion Valley just last week. So these things it's going to be a rough fire season as well. So that grant application is in. Also, the Innovative Finance for National Forest Grant Program gave a very interesting presentation to the SCOG last week. And I believe that Member Schwartz and Member Ellis may want to agendize that for you guys. It's very important to look at how these things can work together. This is sort of a layout based on their experience working across the country of how to bring all these gears together to build jobs, to produce wealth, coming out of the Sustainable Recreation Program and the work we're doing here in the Eastern Sierra. So Mr. Mayor, that's my slightly accelerated version of the presentation. I apologize if I spoke too quickly. I hope that was helpful, and I'm more than happy to entertain any questions if there are any. And thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I mean, I thought it was very thorough. I think I'm one of the only ones who hasn't seen it in other committees, but yeah, thanks very much for that. Very informative. I do have a couple of questions for you. So at this point, the 8 projects, have they been finalized and identified, or is that what's going to happen at the meeting in May?
They have not been finalized or identified yet. There's a special meeting of the partnership coming up on April 23rd, which I believe is a week from Friday. And I think, Karen, I think you're coming to that one. I'm not sure who from Bishop is RSVP'd for that. A facilitated conversation with a gentleman named Michael Ward, who is leading, bringing all this together and establishing, really looking at a 10-year vision for how we as the Eastern Sierra will really start setting up a roadmap. I'll remind all of us that 2121 is only 100 years from now. This might be a very good time to start putting in place that foundation for who we are going to be, whoever comes after us is going to be, to lay a foundation for the Eastern Sierra for this sustained, stewarded landscape that it can be, and that's what's happening now.
And when this project started, how much did you anticipate the pot of money to be for these particular 8 projects?
So the grant, the SRTI itself has funding for us, for the MLTPA team, to work with whatever agency says we want to take a project forward to help with the development of the grant. We can do the research, we can do the mapping, the GIS work. If there's any data development that has to happen, that gets paid for within the context of the grant. One of the things we've been talking about at the SSRP is none of us had any idea that there would be a American Rescue Plan valued at $2 trillion, American Jobs Infrastructure Plan that's $2 to $4 trillion. The state of California budget surplus of $15 billion, and now $1 billion coming out of the state for fuels work. I mean, who could
yeah, and I guess that's getting at the point that I was going to make. If the amount of funding that's available out there, if that would justify maybe not prioritizing 8 but prioritizing 16, are you guys ready to handle that sort of volume? Or?
What we will do is we will do the 8 projects that the grant tells us to do, but there will be a whole inventory of ideas, of funding sources that will be available to all the partners in the region. And you guys will have access to all that. And if the partnership says we want to work with these specific things that we're moving forward as part of the portfolio, but there's a whole list of other things that are there with the funding resources we've identified. It's all public information. It's for all of us to use, and we can all go to town with all this stuff.
Awesome. So it's like a centralized location for a lot of information that we all would want for a bunch of these different projects to help in proposal writing.
Exactly. Yep.
That's really cool.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from other council members? If not, I want to thank you again for coming on and giving us a clear presentation. Thanks, John.
Wonderful to see you guys again. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Okay, see you. Bye.
All right, our next item on the agenda is the Bishop Union High School Student Senate update presented by the Student Senate representative, Karen Rivas.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
All right. My name is Karen Rivas, and I am a student representative for the Student Senate. Once again, thank you to the City Council for providing the Student Senate the time for our report during these meetings. I would like to open by reading the mission statement. Bishop High School Student Senate is a form of student government dedicated to receiving and projecting the student body voice to the community and the Bishop Unified School District through the following: promoting students' interests, needs, and welfare, acting as an intermediary between staff, administration, board, and students, serving our community and school with integrity and passion, We are committed to serving all of our students regardless of individual differences, including but not limited to age, cultural background, disability, ethnicity, domestic situation, gender presentation, immigration status, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. We are excited to inform that we have now hosted 2 virtual scavenger hunts as of this week. The prizes have been themed baskets. There has been a positive amount of participation, and we hope to have the numbers increase throughout the following weeks. We plan to continue this weekly scavenger hunt with the themed prizes until the end of the school year. The Student Senate is also involved in revamping the district and school websites. We are working close with our administration to create an easy and colorful interface. We also have continued with our weekly check-ins and are still collecting pictures for Miss Cress in the yearbook. And in addition to this, we are still accepting designs from the students for the painting of the bathroom stalls. Additionally, the Student Senate next open panel meeting is on April 14th at 6 p.m. being held through Zoom. Thank you so much for your time and have a good evening and stay safe.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Karen. I have a question for you.
Yes.
How are you guys adjusting to going back to school full time?
I was already in seats 2 days, but the classes were definitely a lot smaller, and the feeling of having everyone in a classroom at once it feels really different now, and it takes some time to getting used to. But I'm glad to see everyone back. It definitely made me a lot happier to be there.
And I heard the schools are getting ready to have a joint vaccination drive with the county for students that are 16 and older, because you guys 16 and older is the age limit for the Pfizer vaccine. So I would definitely encourage all of you guys to get protected. Cool.
And Mr. Mayor, I just want to let everyone know our usual Student Senate person, Melina Toomey, she has accepted and is going to go to Berkeley next year.
Oh, I went there many years ago, but I did go there. Not that that means anything. Oh, thanks so much, Karen, for joining us. Have a good evening. Next up on the agenda is County of Inyo update report presented by 2nd District Supervisor Jeff Griffiths. Hey, Jeff.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for inviting me to your meeting. I'm not going to go over the entire report that I submitted, but I'm sure you're curious about some of the COVID issues. It's changing in a fast-changing environment. I will go over the vaccine stuff first. And we've made a ton of progress. We are up to, of the above 18 population in Inyo County, we're up to 45% of people fully vaccinated. And then obviously a higher percentage than that who has had at least their first dose. And we are prepared for this Thursday when everyone over the age of 18 is eligible. We have received word that late this week, early next week, we should be receiving 2,300 doses of the Pfizer vaccine for a first dose mass vaccination clinic. And as Mayor Mahovy mentioned earlier, that is anyone over 16 is eligible for that. And we plan to focus obviously on the entire community, but make a special push for our Latinx community. We have what I think is unique to the state of California. We're going to be using the youth in our high school youth coalitions, which Karen is used to, Karen Kong is used to using in the past to reach out to that community, really use the kids to drive the outreach to our Hispanic community. So that's really exciting. We completed a couple of mass vaccination clinics in the far remote southeastern portions of our county using our Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And even though there's been some supply issues nationwide, we are still receiving some of the vaccine, and we are using the remainder that we have to help inoculate our or vaccinate our homeless and mentally ill population, people that it would be hard to get them back for a second dose. So the 1-dose J&J works really well from that. So that is going really well. And we have had some frantic negotiations with the state, seriously over months and months and months and months and months. But in the past week, we have been able to get them to agree to a couple of changes that will be really beneficial to us. One being that the using a absolute case number as opposed to a percentage per 100,000. We negotiated a metric that prevented us from sliding back in the summer, and that was really useful for a very, very long time. We were finally able to get them to agree to go to use that as far as moving forward. Also that any sliding backwards will only be because of hospitalization rates as opposed to the previous metric. And in addition, we've been able to get them to basically commit that meal days will open, even though it is before the June 15th deadline of the state completely opening up, that the state has agreed to send a team over to work directly with our public health staff to make sure that meal days happen. So it's been a good and productive week as far as that goes. And our case rate continues to decline. We had a couple of family outbreaks last week in the 4 or 5 range, but overall community spread seems to be basically under control. Beyond COVID, I would just say that we had our first power safety shutoff notification that came through today for the next few days for Squaw Meadows. So that's a good reminder to everybody that we need to stay vigilant. Fire season is here. And I believe I saw the trucks going out to a brush fire on the reservation this afternoon. So it's a good reminder to everyone that even as the COVID is dying down, we are in a drought, and fire season is coming. On the drought front, we did just receive notification that Inyo County has received early disaster notification as far as drought, and that will be able to open up assistance for our farming and ranching communities given the anticipated water shortage. And other than that, I'll say hi to Ryan. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. But I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Good to see you as well, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for that update. I'm really glad things are working out with the state. I did have a nice long chat with the head of the California Department of Public Health last week, and he definitely was hearing all of our pleas, and I'm hopeful to see that, yeah, we definitely had an impact there. Cool.
I guess I will also add on that, even though things are looking really good for meal days, we are exploring an event exemption. And we've been working with Senator Borges and Assemblymember Mathis on that, and I may be requesting a letter from the city at some point here soon, and probably a letter from the mayor or the city administrator would work. That is rapidly evolving, but I may be requesting a letter in the next few days.
Yeah, for sure. I was speaking to to Donna and over at Mule Days, and she was indicating like, yep, let's get a letter out. So by all means, we will sign on to whatever letter you guys ask to help make that happen.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Yes,
Jeff, so how's the county building move over going?
So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I talked to some county employees and they were feeling hesitant about it last time that they popped in and peeked in the windows. So.
Okay, last I heard, we're on schedule, but you may have more inside information than I do on that. So last I heard, we're on schedule.
For the end of this month?
Correct.
Okay.
And as I put in my report, we are on schedule for December flights out of the Bishop Airport. We had public meetings for the NEPA CEQA process, and that is wrapping up, and we'll be doing work on the terminal adjustments this fall, and everything's ready for December.
Yeah, that's great. I think today was the deadline to submit comments on the environmental assessment. So I wonder what comments we may have gotten from that. Cool. There are no other questions. Thanks, Jeff.
Great, thank you.
All right, moving on to department reports. Is Chief Joe Dell on, or is he dealing with fire? He might be dealing with a fire, so.
Mayor,
yeah.
I can give you a report on the fire.
For sure.
It's in the field between CV and Sierra Street, directly west of the Catholic Church. It's 5.7 acres. The chief is worried about tomorrow's winds and fire weather watch. This is a wildland fire, not a structure fire. They've been able to stop the forward progress of the fire as of now. He feels there's many hours of mop up that's left. So that's his most recent report as of about 6 o'clock.
Well, hopefully they can all get it under control. And yeah, because when it gets windy, we all know the winds are coming from the west. So we know where that gets blown. Okay. Moving on to Acting Police Chief Josh Ellsworth.
Good evening, Council. A few quick topics. This week, a couple of us attended the drug court graduation over the courthouse. It was presided over by Judge Stout. It was pretty interesting. There was two graduates, two people that in the past have had a lot of contact with law enforcement, but they were able to meet the criteria to join the program, and over quite a few months, especially with COVID, that kind of pushed it back a little further. These two graduates were able to overcome those odds and are now sober and moving on to another chapter in their life. It was an interesting and rewarding experience, because this is the first one I've attended, and there's several other graduates in the program, or not graduates, but participants in the program that will be graduating. There are different stages of the program, but the support that they give one another. One of the graduates who was on probation, who was the odds were against him, was extremely successful, and the DA made a motion to the judge to have his probation released early, and it was granted. So that was, he was very grateful for that. So that was a good experience, and look forward to the future graduations. This week is National Dispatcher Appreciation Week. Our dispatchers are the first people you talk to when you call with a crisis. Even though the dispatcher can't see what's happening, they are the eyes and the ears of our first responders. They're our guardian angels who ensure that the first responders get to an emergency as fast as possible. To appreciate them, we are going to treat them to a lunch tomorrow. So the department's going to sponsor that. We've invited them all to attend, and they're going to then have some time as a group to deflate and enjoy the day. As the weather is changing, staff has seen more activity with the summer days, warmer days approaching. More people are out, more commuter traffic is passing through town. Our overall call volume is increasing. However, this is expected for this time of year. So we're preparing and ready for it. Other than that, that's all I have, unless council has some questions.
None for me. It sounds great work. Jeff?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Jim gives you thumbs up. Thanks, Josh.
No, thank you report on the drug court, Josh. Good to hear that. People get on the right track and having a chance at it again. So thank you.
Yes, it was good. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Public Works Director Destin Deshawn.
Good evening, Mayor Mahovey and council. First off, I guess I'll start with sharing my screen here, if it will allow me. I think everyone can see it now.
Yep.
So first off, I update you on the North Sierra Highway Waterline Project. They are well on their way right now. They started at home in Sierra. They've gone down Sierra, completed the length of the bike path, and have headed east up 395 on the south side and nearly to the vet already. So, and the eastern edge of the vet is the end of the project. As you can see from the photos here, just some interesting ones. It's a 12-inch main. That's a crossing underneath the culverts that DWP has down there. But I guess it's the first time I've seen in my career, they put in 980 feet of pipe on Thursday.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a busy day. So this project will probably wrap up as far as construction by the end of the week, and then we'll disinfect, flush, and put the line in service. Next, I have I've actually briefed you all earlier about the restrooms on Highway 6 near what maybe is called the truck stop area down there. Caltrans had a partnering program, got great news last week. They actually are going to fund not only the half that they promised, but the entire project, a $34,000 one-year trial that will place 4 handicap-sized restrooms cleaned 3 times a week down there, spaced out where we choose. DWP is participating by moving some of their fences back because there's not enough right-of-way to put them on the shoulders. So it's going to be another group effort to work on trash and waste down there in that part of town. Should start July 1 is when the funding will be available. Next was a meeting with Kmart Vons about trash and just overall blight of the entire property, including, we had a chance to talk a little bit about vacant properties, but we will meet with them again tomorrow. There's a third player in this puzzle, and that's the lot south of Vons that's owned by a private party that is actually very interested in doing their share and interested in selling that lot. So that was good news, and I'll have more to report the next time after we meet with all 3 at one time. But they are all acceptable to taking care of the landscape, working on the trash together, and that's the only way we'll get that taken care of. Last week also, Administrator Phillips and I met with the school and the hospital to talk about traffic issues at Home Street, that especially in the morning hours, which has been brought up, I think, by Councilperson Swartz a couple of meetings ago. We're going to try some things on a trial basis, such as everyone enters the school on Grove Street, exits on Pine, right turns only off of those streets from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. See if we can keep the flow of traffic moving and not having all these left-hand turn movements that back up the traffic forever. Caltrans is also being part of it, but I was just informed just just for council meeting, that the school board is going to incentivize and really campaign biking and walking to school. What a great idea. And last but not least, I guess, is I submitted for funding for preliminary design and engineering for the replacement of the East Line Street Bridge that we've talked about for a long time. And it should get formally funded in June, and then we can start work on that. So other than that, unless you have any questions of me, that's all I have for you. And I'll stop this, or try to.
I have a question about the water line. Are there like hookups that if one day the area does get developed, like how do you hook up into that water main?
So right now we're going to the 2 developed lots, which would be the vet and the old boat mart. We're running in 2-inch services to both of those. The water line will be located right underneath the back of sidewalk, so easily accessible in the future when they sell those lots, to promptly hook them up with water and not tear up. And when I say under the sidewalk, Caltrans has a project to build sidewalk down that side of the road coming in the next couple of years. So we worked it out with them and DWP to where we're not tearing things up to connect to it. And then the vet will also be buying into the system and having a 6-inch connection built for their proposed future facility there, the new facility, so they can have fire connections and everything that would be needed with the large building. So yes, we're trying to, and then there's also an irrigation connection along the path for some replacement trees as well. And now I'm having a great time figuring out how to get out of this. Share, there we go. Sorry about that. There.
Karen, were you asking how they go from 12-inch line down to little baby hose, I think?
I wanted to make sure that we had our bases covered there. We don't need like a whole lesson in how water pipes work, but I can.
I'd be more than happy to anytime.
Yes, and on behalf of a lot of voices that I hear from daily, thank you for your work with Caltrans and DWP on the truck stop, and for all the other projects you've been working. It sounds like you've been busy, and seriously, thank you. Way appreciated.
Oh, I do have a question about the bathrooms. Are they going to be locked from, a certain time? You know how we lock the City of Bishop bathrooms? I didn't know if.
At this point, I mean, we're going to be looking at all those suggestions. I'm thinking though, being that it's the truck drivers that are coming in at all hours of the night, and we're hoping that we'll start off, I'm thinking, with leaving them open, because they won't be lit, they won't be heated like our restrooms are downtown. They'll just be the porta potties, so to speak. So we'll see how that goes at first. And that's also why Caltrans, the whole state, I think we were one of 4 projects that got this full funding for it. And it is definitely on a trial basis for that first year. If they're getting torn apart, damaged, we definitely want to be able to lock them up if we need to.
Yeah, I'll just echo those sentiments. Thanks for all your hard work, Dustin. Definitely appreciated.
You're all welcome. Thank you.
All right, on to Community Services Manager, Dan McElroy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a quick update from Community Services and the City Park tonight. In programs, we continue to work on after-school program and our KIND program, and we continue to make modifications as the school changes schedules and necessitates us to change schedules as well, which seems to be the sign of the times, but hopefully we'll get back to a normal schedule here shortly. Also in programs, we've started receiving all of our applications for softball. So I believe the deadline was on Friday. I don't know exactly how many teams will be closed on Friday, but we're preparing for a full adult softball league. And then next up at the end of the month, I got fish camp for me. So we're gonna host 20 kids at the city park, which will be 10 a day for fish camp at the city park. We've also been working, reaching out to other agencies and different services around town to see if they would be interested in hosting camps using our facilities and kind of doing similar to what the town of Mammoth does and being able to promote different camps and different day camps for kids and adults throughout the entire community. So we've begun working on that, and we just got our feelers out there, and we're waiting for some responses for that. In the park, we've been very busy. As you know, weekends, it's like a holiday weekend every weekend here, so it's been very busy. But we did manage to get the pool ready for our employee trainings on the 18th. And then we'll begin our swim team and lap swim on the 26th, as well as entertaining Little League and AYSO on the weekends. We've also finished our annual aeration and fertilizer in the park, but with that comes weeds. So we'll be working on weeds throughout the entire parks, Main Street, around City Hall. Also, we had Eastern Sierra Tree come in and do about $4,000 worth of tree work in the front of the park, as we are planning on having mule days and other large events. It's nice to make the front of the park safe, and it makes me sleep at night. So, and then last, at sunrise, we are beginning the preparation for sale of units 14 and 16. And that's all I have, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Nope. Seems a lot to handle at this time of year as is getting busier and busier as you get ready for summer, right?
Right.
Dan, I heard something today about 8th grade science canoe races.
Oh, that was kind of on the down low, but I'm just kidding. No, it's all Mr. Willie contacted me last week. I put him in contact with Brittany. They scheduled a day to do some cardboard canoe races at the city pool. So it should be awesome. Can't wait to see that.
The kids were really excited when he announced it this morning.
Well, the pool will be ready. Hopefully I can get it around 80 degrees by then. I'm just kidding. It'll be warm for them.
Well, great. Thanks, Dan. Any other questions or comments for Dan? If not, we'll move on to our Associate Planner / Economic Development Coordinator, Elaine Kabala.
Good evening, Mayor Mahove and Council. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So my first update this evening, we have received the administrative draft of the specific plan and mixed use overlay from Alta Planning and Design. So that's exciting. We'll be reviewing that internally for the next week or so, and then they'll pick up our comments, and we will start doing public outreach on that in May. So we're planning to do some public workshops with special workshops for the Planning Commission and the City Council to review the draft plan and provide input. So that project is going very well. I'm very pleased. Second update, I just wanted to let you know that at their meeting in March, I don't remember what month it is, the Planning Commission unanimously approved a recommendation of the commercial cannabis ordinance to the City Council. So we will be bringing that item back to the City Council in the near future. And then I just wanted to provide you with an update on the CDBG CARES Act grants. City Administrator Phillips and I had a meeting with Housing and Community Development to discuss the restaurant voucher program that had been suggested. I do not think that that is going to be something that we can apply for. They just have too many restrictions on how it would be administered. So I just don't think that will be feasible. But we've also reached out to AMACA regarding potential food bank improvements, Wild Iris about emergency shelter. There's also opportunities for micro enterprise grants for local businesses or utilities assistance for families in need. So that's my report on the CDBG CARES Act, and I will be coming back to the council and at the next meeting for further direction on which applications we'll be submitting. So that concludes my department head report for this evening, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate to hear. Is it just there are too many loops in administering the grant and something that we can't just pass on to IMACA since they're already doing a food distribution program?
Yeah, basically, I heard from HCD is that if we provided vouchers or gift certificates or that kind of thing, it would be considered a cash gift, a gift of cash, and they would not do that. And so what we could potentially do is coordinate with the MACA, and then they'd have to put out a bid for restaurants to compete to provide meals on a daily basis to just seniors. Like it just became extremely convoluted to administer the program, unfortunately.
We'll try and think of ways as well. When is the deadline for that grant? They did extend it, right?
They did. It's in May 7th.
May 7th. Okay. So I guess we can discuss it at our next meeting.
Yeah, I will bring that item at our next meeting.
All right. Thank you, Elaine. Any other questions? Nope. Thanks so much, Elaine. Moving on to City Administrator Ron Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Mahovey, members of the council.
Did somebody just boot Ron off? Okay.
Looks like he got moved to attendees.
All right, Ron, let's try this again. Go for it.
I have no idea how that happened. Anyway, the state began collecting the city's new 1% sales tax as of April 1st. We will not see the revenue from that until sometime in June, but that process now is ongoing, and we're delighted that the community supported that proposal and will help our budget considerably for starting next year. We today received a copy of a letter from Senator Borges and Assemblymember Mathis to Governor Newsom supporting Mayor Mahovey's and Inyo County's request that small rural counties be given different parameters than urban counties. And as you heard from Chair Griffith's report, the state has made a change that will make it easier for Inyo County to move from the purple tier to the red tier. And we expect that will happen as of tomorrow. We appreciate Senator Borges and Assemblymember Mathis joining in with the county and the city on that request to the state. Mayor Mahovey and I collaborated on drafting a letter to Representative Obernolte regarding requesting an earmark in the congressional budget for a combined fire station, police station, city hall. And we'll see how that works out. I'm sure he's being inundated with requests for earmarks. Earmarks are now once again acceptable in Congress, and we'll see if we have any success with that. Also, IMACA is ending and discontinuing operation of the emergency parking situation at the old Kmart as of April 25th. So that will no longer be in operation after the 25th of this month. And I already gave you the update on the fire, so I believe that's all I have this evening, unless you have questions.
I get the one question I have is with that parking lot no longer being used for that particular purpose. And we always hear about downtown Bishop having that a lot of people have trouble finding parking. In those discussions, is there any way to ask the property owner if he could make that lot available for visitors to park in during the daytime?
I think that's a possibility. We'll be glad to look into that.
Because I know they put in those barricades relatively recently, and that was mainly to prevent big rigs from parking there. But, and by relatively recently, I mean a few years. But yeah, I mean, it's a centralized lot near the Forest Service offices and close to the commerce in town. And so I think if we could, it doesn't hurt to ask, is I think my point.
Okay. One other thing about the moving from tier to tier. Once we're in the red tier as of tomorrow, hopefully, there is a possibility, and there's no way of guaranteeing this, but you have to stay in each tier 3 weeks and experience the kind of success that is needed to move to the next tier in 3 weeks. But Memorial Day weekend is in the neighborhood of 6 weeks away, which means Inyo County possibly could move to the orange tier and then to the yellow tier just in time for Memorial Day weekend. Again, that is totally dependent on how well we do with the case rates and so on, but that's a hopeful thought.
Cool. Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess just to tag on to that, do we have, because this all happened before I got here, did you set a time, a tier level in which we would start meeting in person again, or what were you thinking?
There was no time set. And I think that my feeling is we probably should follow the lead of Inyo County and when the supervisors begin to meet in person, but that's totally up to the council.
I mean, my rule of thumb is that I kind of think that we shouldn't be meeting in public or together until the public can join us. Because I think it even weirder than having us sitting in a room by ourselves talking to each other would be not to not have any public there to observe and have input. That's kind of my take on it.
That makes sense.
And I mean, I know a lot of you guys are vaxxed already. Some of us aren't fully yet. So, well, thanks, Ron. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, one more comment for Ron and all department heads and all their staff. Thank you for all the work they're doing for the city and the community. Great work, everyone.
We have an excellent staff and I appreciate their work as well. Thank you.
Yes.
Indeed. Okay, moving on to consent calendar. Notice to the public, all matters under the consent calendar are considered routine by the city and will be acted on by one motion. Do we have any questions or comments on the consent calendar? Any public comment?
No public comments on our emails, and I do not see any waved hands. Elaine, can you confirm?
There are no raised hands.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion in 2 seconds.
Was that Schwartz?
It was Schwartz, yes.
Okay.
Liz Schwartz. Robin, call for the vote.
Councilmember Kong,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz,
Yes.
Mayor Mahovey.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and now our next item is a public hearing on a proposed resolution amending and restraining and restating certain fees and changes for city services. So we have to hold a public hearing, and this goes to administration. Who's handling this?
Robin, will you take care of this, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, council. Guess I can do that. Each year, all departments are requested to review fees and charges to determine if they cover the full cost reasonably borne for providing those services. As part of the process, holding a public hearing and providing proposed changes to the public are required by Chapter 3.22 of the Bishop Municipal Code. Proposed changes for fiscal year 21-22 were submitted by the Community Services, Fire, and Public Works/Building departments. At your next meeting, April 26th, the regularly scheduled council meeting, the council will consider adopting the proposed resolution, amending and restating certain fees and charges for city services. Pursuant to Bishop Municipal Code Section 3.22040B, fees and charges will be 60 days for adoption and execution of an executive order by the city administrator, and no written appeal has been filed. Existing fees and charges shall remain in effect and unchanged until these dates. Council has had a chance to review the memos submitted by staff that outlined their changes. The proposed resolution amending and restating certain fees and charges for fiscal year 21-22 is adopted by, if it's adopted by April 26, 2021, the proposed fees and charges will become effective starting July 1 of 2021. City Attorney Pucci has reviewed these items and finds that the recommended action complies with the law. Unless council has any specific questions for me, we'd like to recommend that after the mayor opens the public hearing, council will review the information and hold the public hearing to hear and consider public input on amending and restating certain fees and charges for city services. Council will make a motion to close the public hearing once all comments from the public have been received.
Okay, Robin, thank you for that. And with that, I will open the public hearing. And do we have any comments from the public?
I do not see any comments right now on our public comment email, and I do not see any waved hands. Would you like to discuss or close? You can close it and discuss after, or you can go ahead and continue discussion and close if you wish.
I guess, do we want to have a discussion while it's still open so the public can maybe have some more time to call in? What do you guys think? All right. I guess my comments are effectively we're changing the fees in three main areas. One is community services, and those seem to be nominal changes to the fee structure to account for the increase in minimum wage that for the staff that we have staffing the pools and all of those other and everything else at the park. The other one is with regards to fire safety and doing fire safety inspections and all of those things. And I did reach out to Joe Dell earlier today, and he sent me a few copies of similar fee schedules for other municipalities that are comparable to ours. And those fees are exactly in line with those other ones. And then the third main department is with Public Works. And in that regard, it seems like we've had a different fee structure from the county, which has gotten very confusing for people coming in to pull permits, because we also have county inspectors there. And so we issue permits for the county as well. And this, my understanding is that it puts everything on the same level to speed up a lot of the accounting that ends up happening in that particular office. So that's my understanding of the fee structure. Any other comments?
It was a very good description.
Yeah, it's something that we review annually, and I know that the fire inspection fees are something we've been discussing and reaching out to the public. I had a meeting with the chamber, and I let the board members know that, you know, this was coming, and it's just part of doing business as a city, and it's something we got to constantly look at and evaluate and make sure we're covering our costs.
And Mayor Hobie, I would agree with Karen on that we've talked about in the past. Our building fees have been kind of behind the curve for quite a few years. And, you know, it's just more playing catch up and equity with the state and the county. So I don't think we're outlandish here. I think we're just doing what we have to do. And this is the time we have to do it. So well done.
Robin, did we have any comments from the public, any public input?
Karen, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, and this is really a question for Dan that he doesn't have to answer right now, but just before we vote, the idea that we're going to have a month and a little bit more at a certain fee for everything, the pool and the renting of the ballparks and things, and then it's going to switch mid-season. I was just wondering if that was going to be problematic for them. That was my only thought, is that it seemed like kind of a hassle to switch midstream.
You should stand there. Okay.
To address Karen, it's not a big deal for us. Basically, July 1 is when we start our budget. So, you know, it's just kind of finishing up this year as of normal. And then once we hit July 1, we'll continue as normal. So.
Okay, great. I just didn't want it to be a big hassle for you.
No, and everything's done with a click of a mouse now with our great software. So it's not that big of a deal. So.
Great.
And Karen, just to let you know, if we had to start fees sooner, we would have started this process earlier so that we could accommodate those type of changes, because we've done that in the past as well.
Thanks for that, Robin.
You're welcome.
Well, then can I get a motion to close the public hearing? Or Jim?
Oh, and there's no other public comments, by the way.
Yeah.
Just trying to beat Karen. I will make a motion to close the public hearing. And Karen, I just did this all last Friday.
I'll second that.
Oh, okay. We have a motion from Councilman Member Ellis and a second from Councilmember Garcia. Call for the vote, Robin.
Okay, and just to reiterate, we do not have any further public comments, either on the email or on waved hands. So, Councilmember Kong.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz.
Yes.
Mayor Mahovey.
Yes.
Thank you. Close the public hearing. Thank you. 5-0.
All right, on to new business. Our first item in new business today is a second reading and adoption of an ordinance amending Chapter 2.08 Fire Department of Title II Administration and Personnel of the Bishop Municipal Code. Is this going to you, Ron, since Joe's not here?
Sure. Let me pull that up. I should have been anticipating that. This revision of chapter 2.08 of the code was heard on first reading last month. And the intent is to modernize and update the code to take out the unnecessary job descriptions and regulations, to put in place a foundation for incorporating the current fire code and establish the reporting of the fire chief, who the fire chief reports to. I believe the rest of the staff report is self-explanatory. The city attorney Pucci has reviewed the item and finds it complies with the law, and the recommendation is for council consideration to approve the second reading and adoption of the proposed ordinance relating to chapter 2.08 of the fire department by title only.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, we had the first reading of this basically to streamline all of the processes in the fire department at our last meeting. And we had the one modification that was made, and I mean, I'm happy with that modification. Any other comments, questions? Any input from the public?
No public comments on our email, and I do not see any raised hands. Elaine, can you confirm?
There are no raised hands.
Thank you.
Karen, you want to make a motion?
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve the second reading and adoption of the proposed ordinance relating to chapter 2.08 fire department by title only.
I'll second that.
Double K.
Yeah. Okay, Robin, we have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Bishop, State of California, amending chapter 2.08 Fire Department of Title II, Administration and Personnel of the Bishop Municipal Code. Councilmember Kong.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz.
Yes.
And Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and our last item in new business is an administrative draft 2021 housing element update. And we are about to receive a presentation on this very thorough document. Elaine.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. We are also joined this evening by Sandra Bauer. She is our consultant who is putting together the housing element for us. And she's going to walk us through the presentation. But before we get into that, I just maybe want to provide a little bit of context around the direction we're looking for from the council this evening. So as Sandra will explain, the housing element is required by state law to be updated on a regular basis. For the city of Bishop, that's now every 8 years. And it covers many things, including existing housing stock, strategies to increase housing in the city of Bishop, progress we made on the goals in our last housing element. But this evening, what I'd really like to focus on is we have a state requirement that the Department of Housing and Community Development needs to review this document and provide their feedback on it before it's adopted by the City Council. And so we will be sending this document to them as soon as possible. They have a 2-month period that they require to review it. And we need to have it adopted by the end of August. And so before we send this in, there will be additional public outreach opportunities and additional opportunities for the council to review it and provide input. But before we send it to the state, we really want the council to look at the goals and the actions that are being proposed, because these are something of a commitment we're making to the state. And so we're hoping that the council will look at those this evening. Let us know if you think that they are appropriate for the direction the council would like the city to take, if they are achievable, if there are modifications that need to be made, or if there are additional policies that you think have not. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen and open the presentation and turn it over to Ms. Bauer.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay. Okay, so I'll be repeating some of the things that Elaine's just said, but it is the case. California cities and counties are required to prepare a general plan to guide their decision-making. Okay, well, just as an overview of what we'll cover tonight, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the discussion, but we're going to provide the council with an overview of the update document. We'll discuss the public input that's been received to date. We'll review the tentative schedule, present the draft goals and actions, and then receive your direction on those goals and actions before this document goes to the State Housing and Community Development Department and to the public. California cities and counties are required to prepare a general plan. The housing element is one of 7 mandated elements, and you can prepare additional elements, by the way, but the mandated elements include land use, open space, conservation, circulation, noise, safety, and housing. But unlike other elements, the housing element must be updated on a specific schedule set by the state, and it must be approved by the Housing and Community Development Department. For the current housing update cycle, HCD, that's the acronym for Housing and Community Development, has set a deadline, and this is a firm deadline of August 28th for approval of the housing element. This would be approval by the city, and then it goes back to HCD, and they take additional time to make their final approval. Jurisdictions that do not meet the deadline will be switched into a 4-year update cycle. So right now we're on an 8-year cycle. It would go to 4 years, and the state would require 2 consecutive timely submittals before we could return to the 8-year schedule. The contents covers a very wide range of topics, including existing housing conditions and needs, development of an overall housing strategy with specific goals and policies, a review of the city's success in meeting the goals and the production targets that were set in the 2014 housing element. That's the last one that was prepared for the city. And these targets are set by HCD for each agency through a regional housing needs assessment, and that's called the RHNA, as well as programs, goals, and actions to meet Bishop's RHNA goal for 118 new units through 2027. And that's broken down by income. It includes 15 units for residents with very low income, 10 for other lower income, 12 for moderate income, and 28 units for above moderate income residents. And I do just want to give appreciation to Larry Emerson of AMACA. He has been very helpful, and he's given a lot of his time in helping prepare this document. Public input is an essential component of the housing element process, and the city is pursuing multiple avenues to engage the community. A virtual meeting was held on the 24th of March to discuss the housing element purpose and the goals, to describe the state's requirements for the contents and schedule of the document, and to seek comments from the public about the city's housing programs and recommendations. We had 13 participants at that virtual meeting. We also posted a housing survey on the city's website, and that was online from the 16th of March through the 30th, inviting community recommendations about housing needs and funding priorities. And the 77 responses received to that survey offer wide-ranging ideas and suggestions for your consideration. A second public meeting will be held during the 30-day public review period, and that's public review and comment period for the draft housing element, and the negative declaration will go out at the same time. I expect that that second meeting will be in early May. After the responses to comments are complete, the housing element and the negative declaration will be sent on to the Planning Commission. That too will be a public hearing, probably in July. And then the housing element, the negative declaration, the comments and the responses, and the Planning Commission recommendations will be sent on to City Council, where one or more additional public hearings will be held as the council determines whether to approve the negative declaration and adopt the housing element update. All of this public information is presented in the housing element. And in just a moment, Elaine's going to briefly review the responses that we received to the housing survey. Just briefly cover the comments that we received on the virtual meeting. The 13 participants had a number of questions, and I've put 4 of them here. One question was, would the housing element provide an inventory of vacant homes or properties that are owned by second homeowners? And the answer is that the inventory that's being prepared is going to identify only vacant parcels. Second question was, does AMACA plan to buy a parcel near Vaughn's? And the answer is that AMACA has, with the city's assistance throughout, just recently purchased the Silver Peaks project site, and that's near Spruce and Yaney, which is relatively close to Vaughn's, which might have been what the question was addressing. A third question was, will the housing element discourage purchase of Bishop homes by wealthy investors? It's true that the housing element focuses on providing affordable housing, but it does include programs to support housing at all income levels. And then finally, the question was asked, will the housing element encourage DWP to provide land for housing or to build housing in Bishop? And the answer is yes, it does encourage DWP to use its surplus lands to develop housing in conjunction with the city. So, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Elaine, to talk about the survey responses.
Okay, thank you. So I will just talk about this briefly. As Ms. Bauer said, we had the survey up for about 14 days, and there were 77 responses, which tracks pretty well with the public input that we've received at a lot of the other public meetings we've held. There were a few points that I wanted to highlight that I thought were interesting. First, many of the respondents own their own homes. 63.5% of them own their own home. And many of them were actually, several of them were from outside city limits and were in neighborhoods in West Bishop. But there was also a good number, a good showing of people with homes in city limits, so that's good. There were a few concerns that were really highlighted coming out of this, and the full list of responses, the inventory of responses, is available in this administrative draft housing element if you want to look at it. But one of the largest concerns was a lack of sufficient affordable housing or housing security. And then also the concern that the rising cost of housing is going to displace residents from Bishop. Other concerns were associated with areas of concentrated poverty by developing affordable housing in central locations. And there was some concern about insufficient housing for people with disabilities. The points I really wanted to highlight, though, that I thought were interesting, in addition to those, where there was a heat map that was generated by the survey, and if you look at those items that were considered the most important by respondents, you'll see that some of the options for increasing housing that were most popular or considered most important were developing housing at vacant commercial sites or industrial sites that are allowing for residential use. You can see that 68.5% of respondents thought that was very important, and an additional 23.3% thought it was important. So a large majority of respondents supported this policy. Similarly, the same was true for developing housing near commercial locations to create live-work neighborhoods. and then a similar percentage tracked for developing houses on lots that are underutilized, such as older buildings that have more potential. So I thought that in addition to providing good feedback for the housing element and the policies that we may present to the state in there, it also showed a lot of support for some of the things that we're working on with the specific plan and the mixed use zoning overlay as well. In a separate question, I just pulled this statistic that 84.8% of respondents indicated incentivizing mixed use in downtown was important or very important. So again, just really, we saw a lot of support for those policies from the public. And then I also wanted to highlight the feedback that we got with regards to ADUs, because I think one of the things that we saw in the survey that's very valuable is there's opportunities for the goals and the actions that we can put into our housing element, but then there was these opportunities for things that we can do now. And so the question was, what types of programs would make you consider adding an accessory dwelling unit to your property? And the two highest responses were easy permitting process and inexpensive permitting processes. And what's interesting about this, as you may know, is that the state of California has allowed for ADUs and JADUs, junior ADUs, by right in all residential districts. And what this means is that there is basically no permitting process. You develop plans and you bring them to the city, and planning just basically signs off on them. The barrier for approval is very, very, very low, and the state of California has required that, and we have modified our municipal ordinance accordingly. Likewise, there is no permitting fees, planning permitting fees associated with approving that. There's building permit fees, but there's no planning fee for an ADU approval. And so what I really see here is that there's an opportunity that if people want to put ADUs on their properties, which is really where we've seen the greatest increase in housing units in the last 2 years, the city has this opportunity to say, hey, you can, and we couldn't make it easier for you to do it from the city's perspective. So within that feedback that we saw from the community, I just wanted to highlight that there's also these opportunities for us to just maybe communicate with the public better around maybe their misconceptions around the city making it cumbersome to accomplish these goals that we're really working hard to encourage. So those were just the items I wanted to highlight from the public survey. And with that, I will turn it back to Ms. Bauer to conclude the presentation and take us through the goals and actions.
Okay, so this slide here is talking about some of the suggestions, and yeah, they are indeed in the housing elements. So, and Elaine's touched on them. So why don't we move on to the next slide? The 2019 through 2027 housing element goals and actions. So the draft housing element contains 5 potential goals and a little over 24 potential actions to accompany the goals. And by the way, the goals are based on the state's guidelines for housing needs. The goals and actions are at the heart of this process, and they will be reviewed very closely by HCD. And as a matter of fact, HCD is very thorough in their review generally, but they will be looking to see in particular whether these goals and actions will enable the city to meet its 2027 RHNA goal of 118 new units. To succeed, these goals and actions need to be achievable. They need the support of the city council, and they need the support of the community as well. As we mentioned, the approval date is August 28th, and that does include a 60-day review period for HCD and then subsequent revisions. And this is before the document can be sent to the Planning Commission and on to the City Council. And there will be penalties if indeed we don't meet this schedule. So we're doing everything possible, and I really appreciate your listening to this presentation and giving input tonight to help stay on the schedule. So the goal number 1, provide and maintain adequate sites to develop new housing, to increase housing supply and the mix of housing, and to improve affordability and equity. And we have 7 actions here. And by the way, if anybody wants to stop, and I mean, unless, Elaine, unless you advise that we wait till the end, if anybody does want to raise a question about any of these actions or goals, please feel free to do so. So the first action is that Bishop and DWP will collaborate to establish a long-range property disposition plan to define communication between the 2 agencies and long-term strategies to release surplus Los Angeles property to the city for housing development. The second action is to showcase mixed-use zoning potential. And this would be to hold a showcase event for a staged housing unit above commercial uses at Cottonwood Plaza, to explore opportunities for residential use at other large underused commercial sites, possibly even including the Kmart site. The third action is to encourage and incentivize the construction of modular, prefabricated, co-living, and other innovative designs for limited lot sizes and reduced housing costs. The fourth action, continue to support conversion of vacant commercial property into residential uses in the mixed use overlay zone and the larger DTSP planning area. And that's an acronym for the Downtown Specific Plan. The fifth action is to explore the feasibility of the Silver Peaks project for a density bonus pursuant to the provisions of new legislation. And by the way, in the period since the 2014 housing element was adopted and today has been a very active period in Sacramento, and a great deal of new legislation has been passed. And these are just 2 examples. The sixth action under this goal is again related to Silver Peaks. With AMACA, complete construction and begin accepting resident applications prior to the next housing element update in 2027. And finally, with partners, seek a suitable site and funding for the Veterans Housing Project by December 2024 and initiate construction on that project by December 2026. So those are the 7 actions under the first goal. Does anybody want to discuss any of those actions?
I had one question. If you wouldn't mind going back a couple of slides to some of the survey results, because it actually does apply to the first action on there. So go back one more, that one. So how do you reconcile, well, maybe this is a question for Elaine. How do you reconcile that our respondents to this survey generally don't find it super important to develop on undeveloped LADWP properties, because that one has perhaps one of the lowest scores on the very important and important metric. But then at the same time, they want to develop on vacant land that is zoned for housing development, but not yet developed. So basically, because my understanding is the majority of vacant land that is zoned for housing development, but not yet developed, is undeveloped LADWP properties. So is there a distinction that we think the survey responders are making between what is vacant and residential, and they think that LADWP is a different property altogether? Is there some way that we can kind of disambiguate that, and maybe as we go forward in soliciting public input?
I took that to mean that they didn't want sprawl. You know, like when people say like, oh, one of like the greatest assets is also, you know, that the fact that DWP owns so much of this vast natural landscape. And so I took it as, you know, they want infill, and if that's on DWP land, that's fine, but it's the sprawl that nobody wants. Well, not nobody, but that we would like to avoid. Sorry, Sandra, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, no.
Well, and I go ahead and I'd say that I agree. If I was going to read between the lines, and obviously we did not include all the public input here, so there was a couple of other slides that maybe there's a couple other questions that maybe would provide further insight. But generally, I tend to agree with Councilmember Schwartz that what we saw is that people don't want to sprawl. They want to prioritize infill. Also think that there's probably a misconception about how much land DWP owns. Not everyone, has a running inventory of property ownership in their head. But I would say that I think that's a good question to try and maybe tease out from the public and additional public outreach.
And I will just add that when you look at the individual comments that were given in the survey responses, indeed, many of them did refer to the desire not to encourage sprawl, to maintain compact boundaries, to maintain the small town character of Bishop. We did have one person who thought that the council should consider increasing the sphere of influence and looking at development outside of it, but just one that said that, yeah.
And then, okay, so I mean, that thanks for entertaining me on that. And so if you don't mind, want to and go back to the goal number 1 that we have, I would actually say action 1.1. So the state also passed I guess this is more of a question. The state also passed legislation that required public entities to search their housing inventory, search their land inventory to identify parcels that aren't critical to their operation so that they can make those available for housing. And in particular, I'm thinking we have DWP, obviously, but we also have Caltrans. And I don't know how much land, if any, Fish and Wildlife the entity owns, but is this one of the things where we would want to include also like looking at properties that Caltrans owns and asking them and send them a letter asking them to justify why they should keep it all?
If I can just jump in with that, maybe a good way to handle that would be to have another action that says explore other public land ownership for potential housing suitability. And then that way we're creating a place mark. Really what we're trying to do is to create this good list of things that can be done between now and 2027 that will provide the basis for housing, not just in 2027, which is looking pretty good with the Silver Peaks project that's proposed to have 72 units. But come 2027, and we're going to be looking at another increment. And I think that creates this opportunity. I think it's a great suggestion. So I would add that as maybe an additional action here, an action 1.8. Is there any conversation about that?
I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay.
And another thing I would add is maybe strengthen the language with collaborating with DWP. I think the HCD needs to have our back in DWP divesting those lands. And I think just collaborating, working with our terms that haven't gotten us to where we want to be in the past. And we need to be a bit more forceful in letting HCD know we cannot do this without their specific help, like with the state of California saying they need to not, hide behind the Charles Brown Act and, kind of go through all these little loops of why they can't divest lands. And we need them to be very clear that we can't do it without their help.
So we do have a little bit more on, maybe ways to be a little bit more forceful. And then I'm just going to add a little conjecture. I'm pretty sure that they're under a fair amount of pressure because the state is looking for agencies that have surplus underutilized lands, and DWP will be I think one of the agencies they're thinking of. Now, I don't know that Bishop will be invited to participate in those conversations, but I expect that there's a fair amount of pressure on them. And another point that might be worth making is that Elaine has already met with DWP, and they were more receptive in that meeting than they have been in the past toward the release of surplus properties and identifying specific properties for this next cycle. I don't know if that is encouraging, but I was encouraged by it because there is a long history of not very productive communication.
I've been on this council for a while, and they've been talking about divesting property ever since I've been on this council. And they've been talking about selling their leases to the lessees, and it's gone nowhere. So I really feel like we need to, there's always encouraging conversations. And I think the encouraging conversations keep us feeling encouraged, and nothing happens. So we really
points, Jim.
Yeah, I kind of walk a little fine line here just because of my employer. But I think in that action 1.1 under DWP lands, I don't know from a state standpoint, if we want to, DWP is a component of a city of Los Angeles. And I think there's where your decisions are ultimately going to get made. So if we can put that wording in there, take it away from a little bit from DWP, because it's actually a city of Los Angeles that's going to have to do these things. And it might look different at the state level and attaching a name to it. My thoughts.
That's a good point.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought to Karen Schwartz's point, maybe just referencing the what we're all talking about their requirement to release surplus lands. I mean, referencing it in quotations or in parentheses, what the law is, or whatever the governmental code it fits into, referencing it there so they know, sort of the angle in which we're hoping to take.
Yeah, but I also think this particular action item has to do with getting an inventory of what are their properties, and then us coming up with a prioritization list of which ones we want to go after for housing development. Is that correct, Elaine? And so then, yeah, adding another action on 1.8 to inventory the state agencies' land holdings. The city of Los Angeles would fall under that as well. So I think this is a great goal, and we should definitely strive for it. And I think all of these action items are good with the addition of the 1.8 that we discussed.
And we can include, obviously these are just the goals and the action items, and I think we can probably include a conversation about the context of DWP lands and the availability of developable land and the legislation requiring them to have surplus, and maybe a description of the Charles Valiant Act. We can include all that maybe sort of in the background as we're setting the context of housing in Bishop, rather than in the goals and actions.
Yeah, I think that's good. What's our next goal?
Goal 2 is to promote infill, socioeconomic equity, environmental protection, efficient development patterns, and to allocate supply in proportion to need. And the first action here is to strengthen the mixed-use zone opportunities by completing the final DTSP, selecting an alternative, and incentivizing higher density affordable projects in the specific plan area. Then to modify the DTSP to allow accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and junior ADUs as a permitted use with incentives. Right now, it's shown as a conditionally permitted use, but to comply with the new laws, it would be shown as permitted. Second action is to, after the DTSP approval and selection of an alternative, to amend the zoning code to reflect the new mixed-use zone designation and the standards that are associated with the approved density alternative. The third action is to comply with new laws by adding definitions and requirements for transitional and supportive housing, and a requirement that to rezone a residential property to a lower density, an applicant will be required to concurrently upzone a second property, and that too is legislative. The fourth action is to facilitate the mobile home park resident ownership program by advertising its availability to mobile home park residents and serving as funding co-applicant where feasible. The fifth action here is with partners to prepare and distribute literature regarding equal housing opportunities, weatherization and utility cost reduction programs, and other programs to respond to unmet housing needs in the city of Bishop. And then we have a final action here, and that is to consider establishing a tax increment reinvestment zone in the downtown specific plan area. And if there is support for this, to seek to implement the zone before approving the first DTSP project. Ideally, this would happen before the next housing element update. So those are the 6 actions that are currently under goal 2. And is there discussion?
Sure. I mean, the one thing that I would say is with regards to action 2.5 is that, because I would imagine, given the presentation that you guys just gave about people not wanting to develop ADUs because of permits that aren't present, would public education fall under, would that fall under that action item as well? Where I could imagine we would just, in that case, we could prepare literature and then just send it to every single family dwelling in the city to be able to do that, because I mean there are only a few hundred of them. So that would be my suggestion there.
A little bit later, when we come to later goals, we do have exactly that kind of action. And so when we get to those, if you think that, in fact, maybe it would be good to cross-reference, you know, to say, see also action or actions. Would that be good?
Yeah,
okay.
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
And then another concern, does the increase in unhosted short-term rentals fall under this? Because one of the things that we have seen is in some places where there is an ADU that was nominally getting rented to a permanent resident, that ADU has become exclusively short-term rental, and the ultimate effect of that is remove it from the housing market, and so or the housing inventory. Is there any place, maybe it's in a future goal, where we would kind of address revisiting short-term rental issues?
Yes, that is coming. It's
Okay.
under a later goal. And again, we can cross-reference. Yeah, okay. So then other discussion about any of these actions?
Just because I don't know things, tell me what the benefit of a tax increment financing is and how that would all work, if you could.
Elaine, would you like to talk about that?
I'd be happy to take that. So tax increment financing is a tool that is used by municipalities where basically there's a district that is created and there is a tax that is placed on top of the standard property tax. It's called the increment tax. And that funding can be then used for redevelopment projects. So that whole structure of redevelopment and tax increment finance was made illegal by Jerry Brown when he took office again in 2010, 2011, 12, whatever that was. But it was a very effective mechanism for community revitalization. And so it's come back in some form. And legislators continue to work on making that a more robust tool that municipalities have. So right now there's a tool, it's called an enhanced infrastructure financing district. And I don't know all the particulars of it, which is why this goal would be to explore that if the council had interest in leveraging that as a tool in the next 8 years. But one of the things that what the enhanced infrastructure financing district does is it really limits how those funds can be spent from the way that redevelopment agencies were structured previously. But one of the things that it would allow for is the development of affordable housing. And this is just on my a very, very cursory amount of research I've done on EIFDs. But generally that is the mechanism that municipalities have used in the past for redevelopment projects.
And so we're committing here, what we're committing ourselves to here is to just explore that sphere.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I was checking on, was to make sure that we were not locking ourselves into something that may or may not even be around, between the next few years. So thanks so much.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we okay with this goal and actions? All right.
Then on to goal 3. This is to improve intra-regional relationship between jobs and housing and to increase housing affordability. And the first action here is with AMACA and other partners to pursue all applicable grant and funding opportunities to help develop affordable housing for Bishop residents. The second action is to maintain an inventory of trailer parks, mobile home parks, and apartments to provide housing for disadvantaged populations, and also to monitor the housing stock to ensure that it remains affordable. The third action is with HCD assistance to obtain retroactive RHNA credits for previously completed qualifying rehabilitation efforts. And some of you might recall that in the past, HCD would give credits at a ratio of 1 credit for every rehabilitation projects. So let's say you would have 8 rehabilitation projects, you would actually get credit for having provided 2 new housing units. But that has been withdrawn. Those credits are no longer available except for qualified projects. And we're not fully clear on what the qualification requirements are. However, AMACA has just completed the first of 2 phases in rehabilitating the Valley apartments. And we're fairly certain that those probably are qualifying. So we're going to clarify that process. And and then at the same time, we'll be clarifying, this is the 4th action, we'll clarify for future rehabilitation activities because AMACA has only completed half of the Valley apartment process. And so then the 5th action here is to continue enforcing codes that allow the use of housing for short-term rentals only when the property owner remains in residence, the property is the owner's primary residence, and parking requirements are met on site. So this is going to the one that you were asking about earlier. And then we have a 6th action, which is the Department of Treasury. This is the U.S. Department of Treasury has certified all of Bishop as a qualified opportunity zone. And because of that, private investments in approved activities may be eligible for capital gains tax incentives. There is already 1 qualified opportunity zone in the city, and the city could more actively seek additional investments to create jobs and economic stability. So those are the 6 actions under goal 3.
I mean, I think they're definitely lofty goals and as such big actions, but I mean, we should aim for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Karen, did you?
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one really quick thing. My concern as I was reading this, and if I missed it, please forgive me. The word affordable is always, problematic, because do we have a definition of what I saw the graphs that I really liked about how much of their income they're paying for rent and all of those pieces, but by that number, are we able to drill down what affordable is, or are those numbers that are completely unrelated to Inyo County and just come directly from the state?
So, yeah, the numbers, they are related to actual incomes as reported to the state, and it is the determination of affordability is based on a percentage of the median for a given area. So the very low income, I believe that's up to 60% of the median, and then low would be up to 80%, I believe, and moderate would be 100%. These are ranges, actually, they're not precise targets, but then above moderate. And so there are, in fact, specific numbers attached to that.
Great. That's what my only worry was, is that the words like that are so wishy-washy sometimes.
True. Are we okay then? Okay, very good.
Yep.
We're on goal 4. This is out of 5 goals, and this one is to remove constraints, create incentives for construction of housing to meet the needs of all Bishop residents. And the first action here is to seek HCD's help to allow DWP and Bishop to share the RHNA credits when DWP lands are used to provide affordable housing in Bishop. And this is, trying to create an incentive to incentivize DWP, because they probably are also in need of those credits. And then the second action is to encourage homeowners to construct ADUs, to continue to offer ADU incentives such as reduced parking, and then to seek funding to support the creation of at least one free ADU floor plan and set of construction plans that could be handed out at the permit counter, and with the goal of ideally having those plans available by December of 2024. And I should mention that there is a timeline, and we don't have that set up for this presentation tonight, but for each year through the 2027 next cycle, there is a timeline for completing these actions. And this one here is to try and do it by December 24. And then the third action is to expedite the processing of housing projects for extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income households. The fourth action is to establish relationships with developers outside of Bishop regarding development opportunities and incentives for developers who construct housing in the city of Bishop. The fifth action is to seek a waiver to allow HCD funding on property that's leased for 40 years. That is typically the maximum term of leases offered by the city of Los Angeles, instead of 55 years, which is typically the minimum that HCD seeks. So that's been a problem actually in the past. And then similarly, the sixth action is to seek HCD's help to resolve incompatible loan terms. And this is where federal and state agencies frequently will consummate grants only after the other agency makes the first loan commitment. So this again would help with some of the transactions. The seventh action here is to consider and obtain public input for potential adoption of a new fee on residential and commercial properties that remain vacant on a long-term basis. So those are the 7 actions, that the draft actions that are here under the 4th goal.
Yeah, I mean, my comments, I'm going to echo what Jim had said earlier, and let's just make sure that in all of our documents, instead of calling out DWP, we say City of Los Angeles. And I guess one of my questions is, how does sharing RHNA credits work?
We don't know. That's what this action is to find out. As far as I know, we mentioned this just briefly in a conversation with HCD, and they didn't make any comments. So I'm not certain that it's been done before. They actually did ask, why would the city of Bishop want to do that? But we would like to know, is that something that's feasible? And if so, to let the council know and, to consider this in the negotiations on future activities with the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to find out what are the benefits to us and what are the detriments, of course. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a worthwhile action to look into that for sure.
So that actually leads me to a question I've had from the get-go, which is, they want us to accomplish these. What happens if we don't? I mean, are they dinging us? Are they, just wagging their finger at us? So something like that we don't even know if that's possible or not. How are they going to react if it doesn't happen?
So, I was looking at legislation, and I know that at one point they actually considered, but I don't believe that it passed, but they actually considered that agencies that do not meet their arena targets can be sued by their citizens. I believe that didn't pass, but I don't know yet that they have put harsh teeth into that, although they make it very hard. It gets harder and harder with each of these cycles. Because they're really looking for demonstration. But I think if the legislature sees an opportunity, they're going to put in some harsh teeth with this. So, I do take it, even though I think that those penalties are not yet in place, I do take it quite seriously as a potential for the future.
And then I just wanted to say, I really, when I was reading the comments from the surveys, I really thought it was a great idea, the floor plan thing. So I'm glad to see that you guys have plugged that in there because as someone who's looked at floor plans before, the idea that there's just sort of a set one that we can have people use is a great idea. So thank you for that.
I think that was Elaine's idea, by the way. And a good idea indeed. I agree. Are there any other comments about these 7 actions under goal 4?
Yes, I have a comment. I think some of our housing code needs to be updated for goal 4, because I think it's a constraint. For instance, we require 2 parking spaces per single family home. And I think that is a constraint. And I also think, I was looking at some of our code today, and we only allow a person that works from home to use one of their rooms for their economic purpose. And and the other thing that we don't allow is 2 families to live in a single family home. So we have some code that needs to be updated that could allow for some more housing opportunities.
So what I could do, if this sounds like a good way to handle that comment, we do have that earlier action to amend the zoning code for the DTSP, and maybe that could be a broader review. Does that seem like what you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the downtown specific plan is I mean, sure, I think that those could be a conjunction. I feel like that's pretty specific to the downtown and adding. I feel like our single family zoning just could be looked at. We require covered parking as one of the parking spaces, which seems antiquated to me. So,
actually, I mean, sorry, please go on.
Well, I just, so I maybe with the downtown specific plan, but also maybe here as well, in case you don't want to get it muddled in the downtown specific plan.
Okay, so separate.
My only concern.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in particular, I mean, one of the things that we have seen is if you just look at the last 5 years of conditional use permits and variances that we've had at the Planning Commission, the majority of them have been with regards to the parking requirement. And so just actually seeing which of those zoning codes we need to modify to streamline conversion of say commercial properties to residential, and that's That's, I think, the biggest one. So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to add an 8th action under here, and it will specifically address a broader review for restrictive code standards.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then another incentive for additional housing, and I don't know anything about how to do this, but I used to live in some mountain towns in Colorado, and it was really popular for service workers there to buy deed restricted housing. And you know, I thought that was a really great way to get locals into housing, and that the deed lasted, you know, X amount of years until they could sell it for a fair market value, something like that. But that might be something we could look at as incentivizing with developers.
Okay, all right, I will add that. So this will be probably a 9th action under the 4th goal. I like that. Okay. Are there any other additions or thoughts about the actions there? We'll move on to the 5th one then. Well, are there any other comments on the 4th just before we move on? Okay, well, then we move on to the goal 5, and affirmatively furthering fair housing is it's a term that's widely used, and it is broadly to ensure that there are fair housing opportunities for people at all income levels and with all capabilities and so forth. And the goal here is to inform residents of the fair housing policies and requirements in the city, to preserve, rehabilitate, and enhance existing housing and neighborhoods. And we have 3 actions here right now. These are going back to the idea of making sure people are informed, and that was brought up earlier, I believe, by the mayor. So the first action is to provide a public brochure at City Hall to inform the public about HCD's affirmatively furthering fair housing policies and their requirements, and the City of Bishop's housing element goals and actions in support of fair housing goals. The second action here is to provide a link on the City of Bishop website in the resident section to HCD's fair housing website and to the housing element sections that address the city's fair housing goals, policies, and practices. And then the third action under this goal is to expand outreach to ensure that residents are informed about the city's housing policies, that they know about the housing assistance programs, the housing rights, and the incentives that are available to residents in Bishop. And so this is really trying to make sure, because as Elaine pointed out, it appears that a lot of people may not even be aware of some of the incentives and other opportunities for housing that are available. So 3 actions currently under goal 5.
Those seem reasonable to me. Yeah.
Okay, is there, just talking about this idea about public information, is there anything that isn't covered here that you'd like to add to that, or does this cover sufficiently the goals that the city would have for informing people?
We should definitely make sure that it's in multiple languages, but yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. All right. So then those are the 5 goals. Those are the actions. I did get good direction. I will be making modifications. We probably won't talk again before this goes on to the state, but I'll make sure that the staff agrees that the comments that you shared on these goals and actions tonight are accurately reflected in the changes that we make before it goes on. And thank you so much. I think we have one more slide before we, so these are the scheduling milestones. We've touched on this, so I'll be brief, but the draft housing element will be released ideally, if possible, this Friday to HCD. And that starts their 2-month period. And then within the following 2 weeks, we'll have the draft housing element and the CEQA document ready for the public review period. That's a 30-day review. That would be between the end of April and the end of May. And we would hold a second public meeting during that 30-day public review period, so sometime in mid-May. And we hope to go on to the Planning Commission in late July or mid-July if possible, and then to return to the City Council in August. The final deadline again is August 28th.
Cool. Yeah, it's an ambitious timeline, but we got to do it and let's make it happen.
Well, you know, thank you all again for tonight. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much for your, I mean, your great presentation. And I mean, this is, I think every single one of us council members have always said #1 priority is housing. So, I mean, that's why we need to dedicate this time to it and make sure that we have not only our goals, but our actions to achieve those goals. So it's great.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any comments from the public?
I do not see any public comments from our email, and I do not see any raised hands. Elaine, can you confirm?
There are no raised hands.
Thank you for the presentation, Sandra and Elaine, and you guys have direction.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, much, Sandra.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys. Okay, moving on to future agenda items. Let's see on the little roulette of my screen. We'll start with Councilmember Ellis. Okay, Councilmember Garcia.
Nothing.
Councilmember Kong.
Plenty coming up.
Yeah, we do.
No, I don't have anything either.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz.
Nothing.
I also have nothing to add to the future agenda items. And now moving on to council and committee reports. I'll go first. It's been a while since we've met together, 3 weeks, right? I attended the Dispersed Camping Summit in the meantime, and that the Forest Service put on with Bob Gardner and a bunch of representatives from the county as well as all of the agencies. And there's been a lot of progress that's been made on education with regards to dispersed camping. And a few of us were particularly concerned about planning for the long term versus the short term. And so at some point, there will be a group that forms out of that to kind of come up with a strategy for how do we address the issues that are coming up with dispersed camping in the future. The other thing I wanted to report on, 2 weeks ago, I did get on a call with the legislative staff at Borges and Mathis's office, in particular advocating, explaining to them the situation of how following up on the work that Supervisor Griffiths had been doing for the last many months, just basically explaining the situation of how the current tier system wasn't designed with small population counties in mind, and asking them to advocate on our behalf. And so they did send a letter to the governor as well on our behalf in the last couple of days. And then last week, I also tracked down the director of the California Department of Public Health, Dr. Tomas Aragon, and managed to get a meeting with him. And it was actually quite a great meeting. He started it out with, so I have your letter on my desk. The letter that we sent a few weeks at the beginning of the month, of last month. It's like, I have the letter on my desk. And usually our staff writes a response and I sign it and we send it back to you. But in this case, I couldn't sign the letter because it didn't address some of the very valid concerns you were bringing up. So let's talk about them. And then I went and I nerded out on small number statistics and effectively pointed out to him how it wasn't really making too much sense, the criteria that they had, because they had come up with the small county framework for to help us stay in and less restrictive tiers and not move to more restrictive ones, but didn't do the opposite. And so what I was telling him is like, it's really hard for me to justify to everybody who's asking me why we have to have less than 12 cases per week for 2 weeks, and then we can have up to 35. So that's where we're having trouble. And he definitely understood. And he was like, yep, okay, we're gonna meet with my staff in the next couple of days and see what we can do to revise that and have that make a lot more sense. So fingers crossed. I mean, it seems like we're starting to get some good results out of all of the effort coming from every single angle in that regard. And so we'll see what happens there. And then the last announcement that I want to make is, as we know, in 3 days, the state opens up vaccination to everyone in the state who is 16 years of age and older. And I just want to encourage everybody, let's right now we're almost at 50% fully vaccinated. Let's get that to 70, 80% and then or even higher. And then we won't have to, hopefully won't have to worry about being able to get life back to normal. So yeah, that's all I have. Let's go same order. Jim. Jim's muted.
Oh, I hit mute, unmute. Okay. I can't wait to be back in public where you can actually hear me. Oh, those days. I'll just do quick. Last week, Karen and I did the SCOG meeting and the ESTA meeting. I'll let Karen go into the SCOG more. But we had some great presentations in the meeting. And the one that John Wentworth talked about tonight with the, it's on my notes. Oh my goodness, hold on. Yeah, the qualified ventures regarding innovative financing for national forests. It's a group that kind of brings together campgrounds and the government agencies and kind of bridges the gap between them and private funding. So they reached out to us. I asked for that to be put on the agenda for our next meeting in 2 weeks. That presentation, I think it would benefit the council to listen to the presentation. Well done, and talks about how we've talked about it here with the council a lot, collaboration, how it can move things forward quickly. And I think they're on to something big there. And then we had another presentation from a group concerning the redistricting that's happening in California. And there's some great information out there you can go to. They really want to have us, the councils, the people involved. If you go to Draw My California, it's drawmycacommunity.org. You, the citizen in your community, can actually be involved and your voice can be heard and make a difference in what kind of government we have in the future and what kind of representation we have. Switching over to ESTA mode real quick. Good meeting. There's 2 new buses on order or soon to be on order that will be for the Bishop Dial ride. So we're going to be seeing some new buses here. And then ESTA has new updated and expanded times for longer service hours this summer. They went to the unmet needs analysis and kind of found out where there's some holes. So they're doing a great job of filling those up. And then the Bishop Creek service that we all know from the past that they started will be starting up here again soon, later this spring. And hopefully that will be productive also. My last 2 quick things. I've been working with, we have an Earth Day cleanup scheduled for the Saturday on 4/24 at 9 a.m. We're going to meet at the municipal parking lot right behind City Hall there. And I've been working with Indio 350, Sunrise Rotary, Bishop Waste, Eastern Sierra Land Trust, and a whole conglomeration of groups getting together. We're going to do kind of a modified Earth Day because we can't do a full one. There's going to be Rolling Chef's going to show up and do kind of a discount lunch for everybody. Great Basin's going to provide us some great breakfast type stuff. So I'm inviting you, all the council members and the public to come out and join. And it doesn't sound like fun picking up trash, but it's actually pretty fun. So come have fun with me. And then on the 20th, I have been working with Inyo County and Mono County, the tobacco part of their thing. They have I have notes for that somewhere. I'll get out of the way here quickly, but I have a kind of an Earth Day Summit at 6 p.m. that night. I'll send out links to you guys, but we're going to be talking about how the tobacco component is affecting the environment in the community. So I will be representing on that. So that's about it for me. Great meeting. Thank you. And you guys have a great weekend.
Cool. Jose, any updates?
No, since our last council meeting, there were no meetings for any of the committees that I attend. So I have nothing to report, but I do agree with Jim. We had a great meeting tonight. Looking forward to joining you, Jim, for Earth Day. Thank you.
Awesome. Karen Kong.
Well, I have to say, I appreciate that Jim did not make that 7:30 in the morning. There's much more chance that I will show up at 9 than there would be if it was at 7:30. So my big meeting, as usual, was OVGA, and I'm happy to say they should be out with an administrative draft of the plan in May.
Awesome.
And they're going to give it to us to look at, and then they're going to open it up for public meetings and public comments. What I found was super interesting about the meeting this time was that there were a lot of other things on the agenda that were not plan related. And without them actually saying the words, I kind of gathered that maybe they have some thoughts about how this group can go on once the plan is complete. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition or if that's just me being suspicious or not. We did also mostly agree to put a Tri-Valley water assessment on a list of possible projects for the state in the future. It's just putting them on the list without any promises as to whether we would do it or they would do it, just getting them on the list. They were not necessarily in favor of that, but my position was that it never hurts to get on the list. Doesn't mean you have to do it. And if they happen to be ready or in a different place when their name comes up on the list, then it'll be there and we won't have to start from scratch. So that happened. I do want to say that Stephen is a little too modest right now, that apparently he's getting interviewed by NPR tomorrow to talk about the California tiered system and how it's impacted Bishop specifically. So that will be fun to listen to. So yay, Stephen. And then I have been talking with Inyo 350, Betsy McDonald specifically, a little bit more about the safe parking situation. And, she's asking how much the city wants to step into that. And I told her that we hadn't really talked about it as a council yet. And that as IMACA moves forward, I am going to those meetings. And as IMACA moves forward, thinking about new things, I'll be there. And then if and when it arises, I will bring it to the council as something for a new agenda item.
Thanks for making me blush. That's all right. It's the Sacramento NPR station, though. Karen Schwartz, Council Committee update.
I attended with Jim the ESTA and SCOG meeting on Friday, and then I also attended the ESSRP meeting. And so we had an update from the forest saying that with some Great American Outdoor Act funds, they have upgraded some bathrooms at some day use sites. They upgraded the boat launch at Silver Lake, and they're doing some trail work on the JMT near Reds Meadow. The ESSRP also has created a tribal subcommittee comprising of Leslie Yen, Jeff Griffiths, and Stacy Corliss. And they're just looking for some ways to outreach to the tribes so they can join the partnership. And then I'll just elaborate a little bit more on the Quantified Ventures firm that the ESSRP is working with. And basically they come up with financing models to make some public lands profitable for the communities around them. And so one thing that they were letting us know about is this mountain bike trail that they helped work with different land agencies, public and private, that they helped develop in Ohio. And they want to use that model for some of our campgrounds that are in desperate need of repair. And then once the Forest Service campgrounds are up and running and financially solvent, we could take that model to maybe some of the Inyo County campgrounds or other campgrounds in the area. So Jim and I had requested that they do the presentation for Bishop, just because even though we are mostly surrounded by DWP land, obviously the public lands around us do impact our local economy. And then Jeff touched on, Jim touched on ESTA and SCOG, so I don't think I need to go into that anymore. But I am really excited for the coronavirus to end on June 15th, and we'll be done, and I just can't wait.
But we have Mule Days before that. Aren't you even more excited about that?
I am, but that's just it's a little variance. June 15th, it is gone, eradicated.
God, well, let's all get vaccinated so we can do that, please. And yeah, so if there's nothing else, I guess we will adjourn until Monday, April 26th at 6 p.m. And everybody who can, go get your shots. It is not scary, and it is much better than getting COVID.
Thanks, everyone. See you
Thank
later.
Bye.
Bye, Ron. Bye, Ryan.